All right, good evening. I will be responding to a series of questions that were posed by the account Leaving Ismailism. These were titled Questions for an All-Wise. I'm not an all-wise, but I am an assistant professor of religion. I hold a PhD and 2 master's degrees in Islamic studies from Harvard University, and I've been specializing in the intellectual history of Islam through 10 years of academic study. So I'll be responding to these questions, beginning with the first question, and I'll just post that for you guys. And the first question was, why are the Farmans, that is the religious guidance of the Ismaili Imam, private and restricted to Ismaili Muslims only? Why are these Farmans not available to the entire public? So the real answer to this question is because the Imam giving Farmans to Ismaili Muslims exclusively is part of the Imam's commitment in what is known as the Baya. A Baya is a spiritual agreement, a spiritual contract that every Ismaili Muslim has entered into with the Ismaili Imam. The word Baya means buying or selling in Arabic. And when the Ismailis and the Imam enter into a Baya, each Ismaili is making a set of commitments to the Imam. And what the Ismaili commits to the Imam is their loyalty, their devotion, and their obedience, and the recognition that the Imam is their spiritual guide. A Baya is a two-way agreement. So just as the Ismaili Muslim makes commitments to the Imam within the Baya, the Imam, for his part of the Baya, makes commitments to each and every Ismaili Muslim murid. The Imam's commitments within the Baya consist of the Imam's spiritual guidance of the believer, the Imam's spiritual protection over the believer, and the Imam's spiritual blessings for the believer. So the Imam has made commitments in the Baya, and every Ismaili Muslim has made commitments in the Baya, and that's why the Baya is a contract. It is a contract that binds the Imam and every Ismaili Muslim murid into a set of contractual promises. It is a spiritual contract. The Farmans that the Imam gives is part of the Imam's commitment in the Baya. And the reason why only Ismaili Muslims are allowed to hear these Farmans and have access to them is because only Ismailis have completed or submitted formal commitments in the Baya which grant them access to the Imam's commitments in the Baya. Okay, so it's a simple matter of whether someone has entered into the contract or not. If you've entered into the Baya contract with the Imam, you are entitled to the Farmans that the Imam has made. If you have not entered into a Baya with the Imam, then you don't get access to the Farmans which the Imam is providing in the Baya because you have not done your part of the Baya. You have not pledged your commitment and obedience to the Imam. So it's really as simple as that. And this idea of Baya granting a believer access to certain types of guidance, the Ismailis didn't invent this. In fact, this is a continuation of the Sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad. It is well known from the Quran that those Muslims who wanted to be counted as believers, as true followers of the Prophet, they were required to show formally that they are committed to the Prophet by taking Baya to the Prophet. Okay, they had to make Baya to the Prophet. There are instances of these Bayas mentioned in the Quran in several verses, such as Surah 48 verse 10, among others. So we know for a fact that the early Muslims, if they wanted to be counted as the Mu'mineen, the believers, they had to first take Baya with the Prophet, and only then were they counted as believers. And for those who are counted as believers at the time of the Prophet, there is special guidance in the Quran, special verses, that are only and exclusively addressed to the believers who did Baya with the Prophet. These verses all begin with the phrase, Ya ayyuhal ladhina amanu. O ye who believe. Those verses, when they were originally revealed through the Prophet, were exclusively for the followers of Muhammad who believed in him and who gave him Baya. If you were not one who had given Baya, or if you were not a believer, if you were a mere Muslim, because remember the Quran differentiates between Mu'mins and Muslims, or if you were a Jew or Christian, or if you were one of the pagan Arabs, all those verses that begin with Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu, you did not have access to those parts of the Quran originally. This is before the Quran becomes a book. So when the Prophet was alive, those verses were not accessible to non-believers. Yes, there are other verses of the Quran that address people who are not believers. Some verses address all of mankind, right? O children of Adam. Some verses say, Ya ayyuhan nas, O people. So yes, those verses were for non-believers. Some verses address the people of the book. Yes, those are for Jews and Christians. But a number of Quranic verses are initially addressed to the believers only. And if you are a believer, you had to give bayah to the Prophet. So the principle of guidance that is exclusive to a certain group within the community, within the larger community, that starts at the time of the Prophet. The Ismailis have simply continued the sunnah of the Prophet when it comes to Baya and the Farmans of the Imam being exclusive. And there is one tradition that the rest of the Muslims still hold to where there is exclusivity. Namely, the two holy places, Mecca and Medina, the Kaaba, which is the house of God, these spaces are restricted to Muslims. A non-Muslim is not allowed to go to the Kaaba. A non-Muslim is not allowed to visit the holy places. It's simply not allowed. So I could ask the same question back to leaving Ismailism. You had said that why is the guidance of a manifestation of God, as you termed it, not available to all of humanity? Well, I'll throw the question back. Why is the Kaaba, which is the house of God, the Baytullah for all Muslims, why is the Kaaba restricted to Muslims only? If it's the house of God, it should be open to all of humanity. You should let all of humanity come to the Kaaba. That would be my counter question to you. Now, some concluding remarks. The idea of an exclusive discourse, whether it's exclusive guidance, exclusive spaces for prayer or congregation, this is not some Ismaili Muslim invention. All Muslims have done this. There are many Sufi groups who throughout their history and to the current day, they pray for their tariqah practices in exclusive spaces known as Khanaka, Riba, Zawiya, and Jamatkhanas. There have been non-Sufi groups of Muslims who study Kalam theology or who study the Islamic sciences. Many of their teaching sessions would take place in private, exclusive spaces, often in the privacy of someone's home. This has been documented by scholars like Jonathan Berkey. There were certain Islamic subjects, such as Kalam theology and philosophy, that were not taught to the common people. The Sunni Imam Ghazali wrote an entire book titled Restraining the Common People from Kalam Theology. So to pretend that only Ismailis have an exclusive private discourse is a fiction. Private spaces is something that all Muslims have engaged in to this day.